coming right there. All right. Hey guys, welcome to Tactical Rifleman. Imre and Ryan here. We're going to do a brief discussion here on some of the differences between Krav Maga as it's taught here and Krav Maga as it's taught in the military in Israel. For some people, it's maybe not the most important topic, but I for sure have gotten so many questions on this whole thing that we really kind of want to get that out there and let people understand really what the true deal is.
Yeah. Can you talk a second? What does Krav Maga mean? Like what?
Okay.
The actual terminology.
Right. So Krav is combat or a battle, and Maga is contact. And so Krav Maga literally is hand-to-hand combat. That's all it really refers to. And just like here we may say combatives. Combatives is your non-shooting part of your fighting in the U.S. Army. In Israel, everything that is the not shooting part we refer to as Krav Maga.
So if I said Taekwondo, everybody has a vision of what that looks like, right? There's just like everything. There's different organizations of Taekwondo and whatever. If I said boxing or if I said Muay Thai, everybody has a certain thought about what that looks like. Mm-hmm. Is that true for Krav Maga as it is presented in Israel?
You know, that's actually a really interesting question because I would say there's not a very clear-cut answer. To me, I would say yes. But it's not a definitive yes, because there's not specific moves that you do, and if you veer from these moves, it's no longer Krav Maga. What it is the way I explain it, right? Krav Maga is 90% aggression and 10% technique. And so really it's the methodology of training guys in the military mainly to be aggressive and to start as the underdog, to not give up, and then, you know, yeah, we do some moves, you know, it's basic punches, a few kicks, and later on there's a little bit of fancy stuff, but it's really not fancy, it's just specific. Yeah. Sentry removal is the one that everybody always talks about, right? Yeah, there's a technique to it. Have I ever had to do specifically sentry removal with a knife? No. But because it's taught in a very similar way, what happens is you end up having a lot of people whose body mechanics very much resemble each other's.
Sure.
And that's why I say yes. But, you know, is it like you throw a hook like this or you throw a hook like, you know, whatever? No.
Right. There's not a manual with 110 techniques, and this is the way everybody is going to perform these things.
Right. Absolutely. In the military, of course, there's manuals for everything. Sure. But the manuals do not say, you know, oh, it's got to be, you know, up here. And, you know, those are things that you do because otherwise you get hurt.
Right.
Right. So yeah, the manuals I'm familiar with regarding Krav Maga in my unit do not go down necessarily to those. Yeah, you'll plan a training for the day.
Sure.
Right? And you'll say, okay, today we're working on these punches, these kicks, these elbows, whatever. Or often what we have is straight up aggression training. And I've probably had a lot more of that than any sort of technical Krav Maga training. Our first few months in this, you know, so, okay, basic training, which is whatever, different topic.
Sure.
From basic training and special operations units in Israel, you have what's called unit basic training. So from there and for the next few months, you have Krav Maga a lot. Yeah. And the majority of it is you're in push-up position on your fists, on gravel or on the road, and the instructors are walking around and beating the crap out of you, right? That to me is Krav Maga. Yeah. Right? That's the foundation.
Right. So it's a mindset. It's a physical, mental, emotional toughness kind of delivery system that happens to have fighting elements that are a part of it, right? As opposed to, okay, if they do this to you, you're going to do this thing back to them.
I don't remember very many times. Maybe in CT school when we did our hostage rescue stuff, we had a few if that then.
Yep.
If whatever, you know what I mean. But for the most part, no. It's, our training is, like I was telling you before, one of my favorite drills is we have a bus. Every team has a bus to take them around to their different training locations and whatever. You get your whole team on there with boxing gloves and mouthpieces, and one guy's off the bus, and you got to get up onto the front door, fight your way through everybody, and get off the back door, and then the next person, you'll have a circle, and everybody's just knocking the crap out of you, and you got to fight your way out of the circle. That, to me, is what we do. And
so, would you label Krav Maga as a martial art?
Definitely not. Not in the military sense. Right? There are some people in Israel as well who have taken it to the martial art world, and that's fine. That's cool. Because what's really cool to me about Krav Maga is that you can make it your own, right? So when people see, and you and I have had conversations about this as well, people say, well, that's not Krav Maga, that's Muay Thai. Yeah, because it works. And so we're like, yep, cool, we'll keep that. Why do we train? Why did I train with American SF guys and SF guys from all kinds of other countries? So we can learn from each other and adopt what works for us and pass on knowledge, et cetera.
And I think that was, I trained in Krav Maga in America for many years. Co-authored several books on the topic. Got what would be deemed a second-degree black belt in Krav Maga. But I think the thing that, because I had done a lot of other things. I had done Muay Thai, I had done wrestling and jiu-jitsu and arnis and boxing and all these other things. And I think a lot of the marketing vernacular that was common for Krav Maga didn't really match what was being presented. It was being sold as not a martial art. It was being sold as constantly evolving. It was being sold as, this works for everyone. But in application, at least from my point of view, it was very much a martial art. There was bowing at the beginning of class.
Really?
Yes. There were, even though they didn't wear them, there were belts, there were ranks. There was a hierarchy, just like you would see in any martial art. And then the idea that it was constantly evolving, I just didn't see that. I saw a system and organizations that were very comfortable in their set curriculum. And even with the proliferation of mixed martial arts, and UFC, and a heavier emphasis on ground fighting, and a heavier emphasis on clinch fighting, and a heavier emphasis on submissions and these kinds of things, I didn't see the Krav Maga that I was experiencing and a part of really addressing that evolution that was, I think, mostly clear to people that were really paying attention in the martial arts world. It was no longer going to be enough to say, oh, you're on the ground, just get up. Or don't go to the ground. Well, yeah, that's great. That's awesome. I would prefer to not go to the ground.
Well, that's just like telling a shooter, hey, you're jerking the trigger. Stop jerking the trigger. Yep, tell me what to do.
Right.
Don't tell me what not to do. Tell me what to do.
Help me fix it. Well, and that's a great point. A couple of my instructors were Israeli, and they were awesome dudes, badass dudes. And what I learned from them more than anything was the toughness, the mindset, the never quit, we're gonna beat the shit out of each other. And that not that they weren't technically proficient, but that's not what my takeaway from them was. And I do remember in one of my instructor courses, and the instructor courses were brutal. I mean, they really were. They were 8-day courses, and it was 12 hours a day, 10 hours some days, and you would just, for the most part, you're beating the hell out of each other. That changed, that evolved. that did evolve because the attrition rate there was very high. And I do remember, guys walking by, instructors walking by and being like, "You're just gonna keep doing it wrong?" And then just keep walking. And I'm thinking,
Really?
Well, I guess if you're not going to tell me how to fix it,
So let me ask you this, because
Yep.
this is something that I've faced since I've started teaching civilians here in the States.
Yep.
Which is, I started teaching even my shooting. My shooting is essentially Krav Maga,
Yep.
right? Once you get your core skills together, I like introducing the disruptive environments and getting in your face and pushing you around, because it puts you in that headspace of the real situation, right? It's not because somebody's going to be doing that to you while you're shooting. But what I realized was, these people have to go to work tomorrow.
Yep.
And some of these people aren't trying to be soldiers.
Yep.
So what's your take on how to balance that?
It's a really fine line to walk, and we talk about this when I teach instructor courses, that trying to find that balance between doing what you say you're going to do, which is offer a realistic training environment to truthfully prepare people for violence, but then also in a safe way to where, I own 2 training centers. One training center is it's a smaller city, much more blue collar. The other one is a much larger city, doctors, lawyers, bankers, accountants, college kids, that kind of thing. Where if you're a lawyer, you don't want to go back and have to argue a case tomorrow with a black eye or your nose not where it was the day before, So it is a hard balance to strike. And I think for us, what you try to do is just be brutally honest with people. Like, these are the principles. These are some technical aspects of those principles, because the principles should drive the techniques, not the other way around, which is what I think happens a lot of times. And you cannot be prepared for violence without fighting. You're going to have to spar. You're going to have to get hands-on. You're going to have to clinch wrestle. You're going to have to grapple. You're going to have to do all these things. You're going to have to get, back-to-back and not know who you're back-to-back with. And I'm going to turn off the lights and put on strobe lights, and you've got boxing gloves on, and I'm going to say go, and you're going to turn around, and you're not going to know who you're fighting.
That sounds like fun. That's a good drill.
We do some really cool stuff like that, But I have to be honest with them. You may get hurt. You may get injured. These things may happen. If that's not for you, that's cool. That's your decision. Because ultimately, my goal is just to enhance your survivability, And so if we have to progress that like this as opposed to like this, then that's what we'll do. Because even if I can get somebody to where they have the confidence to just punch somebody else in the face, if that's what's called for, somebody that's never thought about hitting another human being in their lives, well, that's a win. If they were better than they were yesterday, then we're good. But I let them know this is what we're striving for. Most of you are not going to want this. Most of you are not going to be prepared for this. But eventually, you may see this is where you want to go. This is where you want to be. Because it is a hard line to walk. And I don't want, because what we do is already daunting anyway. It's already scary to people. Like,
Sure.
People don't want to get punched in the face. Like, especially if you're a regular person, regular job, you got a family, whatever. They don't want to get punched in the face. And so I want the way that we deliver that information to be on the front end as inviting as possible. But intellectually honest with them with what the ultimate goals are.
Now, here's the thing, right? Is just to your point, you have to get punched in the face to know what it feels like to get punched in the face.
Yes.
Does that make sense? All right. So it's an important thing. There are ways that I've kind of figured out for myself to slowly tiptoe people into that realm of feeling, right? I'm curious how you do it with, what I'll do is I'll take a kick pad and I'll make people hold each other's kick pads, right? And that's kind of your gentle way, and you do certain things that may, maybe make them hold it closer to their body so they're feeling a little bit more of that impact, right? What are some of your tricks for that?
So we definitely do pad work to where they're feeling that contact, but it's not just bone on bone, skin on skin, muscle on muscle, whatever. And then when we go to sparring, our first initial introduction to sparring for people is at clinch range. And we start from clinch and gradually work our way out. Because people are most daunted if we start at boxing range or kickboxing range or whatever, where I can fully extend and get full power on my shots or whatever. That's where people tend to shut down and crumble, because I can really get amplitude on my shots.
Yeah, it's where strikes connect the
That's
hardest. Right.
So if I start with pad work and then I build to, okay, we're going to clinch spar. Now in our clinch sparring, we're going to open up open hand strikes to the body. We're going to open up knees to the legs, those kinds of things. So we're gradually working our way out, because here I know that I can't get hit as hard as here. But I get to feel it. And I get to feel a little bit more here and a little bit more here. And we start gradually working our way out to that boxing, kickboxing kind of range. And now they've done it enough to where they've felt another body on them. They've felt that energy. They've been hit a little bit. They've recognized, okay, I can get hit and it's not the worst thing in the world. I'm not just going to fall down and look like I stepped in a hole and die, you know. As opposed to, okay, we touch hands and now all of a sudden, boom, I'm getting cracked in the face. And I may not ever see that person again. So that's the way that we kind of progress it. Pad work, clinch sparring, where they're doing a lot of vertical grappling. Then add open hand strikes to that, add some low line attacks to that, and then start working our way from that range outward. Because, I mean, the truth is, like, especially if we're talking about just straight up self-defense, you've got a woman that's being choked, being grabbed, being bear hugged, you know, being taken down to the ground, whatever. That clinch range is where I believe fights are won and lost. If you can't manage that clinch range, you know, unless you're just hitting somebody first or being hit first, if you can't manage that clinch range, it's going to be very difficult for you to win a fight.
So this is something I really was kind of hoping we'd get into here, is talk about actually some of the technical differences,
Yep.
because obviously on the aggression front, we're trying to be in the same place, right? Trying to develop that fighting mode, right? I call it the red zone, because that's just how it's always been in my mind. Switching on, switching off, all that.
Right.
That should be about in alignment with not necessarily how it's done, but what we're striving for.
Yep.
But on the technique front, there are some differences that should stay different depending on who's learning it, right? So, you know, in the military, and I bring this up because you're talking about that clinch distance. For me in the military, first of all, I'm always driving forward, right? Always driving forward, which to my understanding, and, you know, educate me if I'm wrong, in my understanding, the way it's taught here in the States is not very different, right? You're always striving to drive forward. But our objectives are different, right? And so to me, if I'm driving forward and I'm taking that initiative, whether I'm armed or not, and still Krav Maga, right? So I'm always closing distance. That's my job, is to close the distance to the terrorist, right? And but of course, I'm striving for that contact as well, right? As opposed to in a civilian context, even now, I should be turning around, running away if I have the opportunity to. So I'm striving for that clinch distance, and that's a really cool thing that you touched on that kind of struck a nerve in a good way with me. So I wonder what your thoughts are on technically the differences.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I'm speaking for my experience with Krav Maga in America, clinch range was not something that was well taught. It was not prioritized.
For the record, it was not in the military either.
Yeah. And from my perspective, again, because if we're talking context, and I'm talking about teaching the housewife, teaching the soccer mom, teaching the accountant, teaching the lawyer, whatever, they're going to be grabbed. Like that's what they're most likely to encounter, whether it's grabbing the hair, grabbing the neck, grabbing the clothing, grabbing the body, whatever, they're going to be grabbed. That is clinch. It might just be a moment in time, and hopefully it is. And the more time that I spend touching hands and clinching with somebody, the more likely it is that it's just a quick moment in time, because I've swam in those waters a lot. But that's not the way it's typically been done here in the U.S. with Krav Maga. It's been heavily relied on strikes, which I understand. I'm a kickboxer by nature. I get it. I love it. But I think it assumes something that's not totally correct when we're talking about a self-defense context.
Because invariably, most fights end up on the ground or in some sort of a clinch position, right?
Yeah, right. Because in the military, you're assaulting, right? You're going in, you're hard charging, you're going for the bad guy.
Yeah.
In the civilian world, it's the opposite. The bad guy's going for you, right? And so while you're looking to close that distance and take that space, and own, that's right. Well, the bad guy's doing that on the flip side. And so if I don't understand how to manage that space, how to control that range, how to get outside the elbows, how to use that person's energy, I'm going to end up on the ground almost for sure every time, and it's not going to be in a position that's advantageous to me. If I learn to dominate the clinch, and dominate is a relative term.
Sure.
If I learn to dominate the clinch, then if we go to the ground, it should be on my terms. And that means that I'm going to be in a better position.
Hopefully.
And hopefully, if I choose to not go to the ground, then I can do that because I'm very good in that clinch range. If I suck in that clinch range and that person wants to put me on the ground, I'm going to the ground. Mm-hmm. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. That's where you're going to go. If you've got hands on me, I don't understand clinch. I don't understand push-pull energy. I don't understand creating angles. I don't understand high-low. I don't understand leverage and posture breaks and all these kinds of things. And you decide, I'm going to put this dude on the ground, I'm going to the ground. Right. I still might go to the ground anyway. You're a big, strong guy. We've talked about this. Those attributes matter. But without an understanding of that range, I'm going there for sure. And I feel like at least the Krav Maga that I was exposed to for many years almost completely neglected that range with the idea of, well, I'll move, I'll be aggressive, I'll hit them harder and more often than they hit me, which is awesome in principle. But it's not always going to be realistic, especially when we're talking about, I'm probably starting from behind. Mm-hmm. I'm getting into my car, and now I just got slammed up against the hood.
Right.
You know, and now I got to fight.
You know, it's an interesting thing because when we do Krav Maga in the military, most of the time, we train to start from behind like that, right? Now, that's not the context in which we're fighting.
Right.
So why do we train to be the underdog? Why do I dogpile the entire team on one guy and tell him to fight out of there? First of all, I mean, it's possible to be in that situation, but training as the underdog, training from I've already lost essentially, is how you develop the warrior mindset. If you don't feel what it feels like to lose and to get your butt whooped, you know, you're losing.
Right.
And this is also where I'd like to connect this with all the gun people in our country, right? Our gun community, there are a few ways of thought that we're stuck in thinking, and I'd like for people to try to break that barrier. And so this is true for both worlds. Think about this, guys, as you're watching this. How many times have you imagined a scenario where you have to defend yourself, right? Whether it's a school thing or in your house, whether it's a gun, whether it's hand-to-hand, whatever it is. How many times have you imagined that? Hopefully a lot. Hopefully you've imagined a lot of scenarios, right? How many times in those scenarios do you imagine yourself losing as the outcome, right? And I say this in a lot of my classes. We neglect, because we're not wired to. We're wired to think of, well, then I do this, then I do that, then he's going to go down, right? I strongly urge everybody to start thinking of how we lose.
Yeah.
Because that's our driving force, right? That's why we start from behind. And in the sense of what we're talking about, the civilian application of Krav Maga, you know, that literally is the case because by definition, we've been ambushed.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I will say too, I think there are diminishing returns too. You know, if I put you prone and I back mount you with a gun to your head, you've made a whole lot of mistakes for me to get to that point.
To get to there in the beginning.
Yep. And so while I'm not saying you're done, there's no options, forget it, it's over, I also think that we owe it to students to let them know, look, at some point, you're just too late, because if we don't, then I think they think it's okay to neglect these 17 things that they screwed up before they got to that position. Because there, I'm going to give you some technical response, but truthfully, if you weren't good enough to avoid that, you're probably not going to be good enough to get out of that.
So you're 100% correct. I agree. But just so that there's no misunderstandings here, that doesn't mean you forget it, fuck it, I quit.
Right, sure.
Right? That doesn't mean quit.
No.
but don't let yourself get there, right?
It means spend more time on avoiding that situation than on finding yourself there. Right? Because, and obviously I picked a very extreme example, but I picked it for a reason because I know that things like that sell seminars and sell DVDs and that kind of stuff. And it's not cool or sexy to train clinch work and to train hitting somebody first and those kinds of things. But that's where I truly believe that fights are won and lost. And if I'm good there, the odds of me ending up there are very, very slim.
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully. I mean, that's what we train for.
Yep.
We train to not be there.
Yep.
Right? Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I think there's a lot more similarities than differences. The differences between our military style thing and the civilian application, they're few. There are some, but the guiding principles are the same, right? I mean, and I know you like to teach mainly based on principles as I do, and I think that's the way it should be done. But I also, Krav Maga is what you make of it, right? And you are a grappler, correct? Yep. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something that is incredibly important, right? The people that say jujitsu is bullshit, it doesn't apply in the street, you don't know what you're talking about. The people that say, well, all I need is jujitsu, you also don't know what you're talking about, right? So you need to be able to have that range of capabilities, whatever that range is that's fit for you, your body, your, whatever, your abilities. I can tell you that I think that Krav Maga specifically is I agree with what you said, it's quite lacking in grappling. It's quite lacking in ground skills. Yeah, there's some moves.
Sure.
Aggression will help, but without any technique from that situation, you're kind of toast.
Yeah.
Story from the military, I ran a team, never mind what the team was, but I ran a team for a while, and I had 6 guys. And I, at that time, like Carl likes to say, there's shitty people everywhere, right? And in the best of places, you get shitty people sometimes. We had shitty Krav Maga instructors at the time. And I said, that's it. We're not going to these Krav instructors anymore. I went to the unit commander, to our colonel, and I was already, whatever. I was in a position where I could do that.
Right.
And I went to the colonel and I said, hey, look, these guys suck. And I know you can't kick them out tomorrow, but I'm not taking my guys there. I'm doing it myself. And he said, okay, tell me what you want to do. I said, here's what we're missing. Here's what I'm going to work on. Here's my background for doing this. And he said, okay, cool. Have fun. And so I started training my own team. And what I did was, back in high school, I played football, I wrestled, and I boxed. And I was kind of an angry kid, too. So that kind of enabled all those things.
I wouldn't have guessed.
No, and Chad's back there probably looking at me going, oh, yeah, you're still angry. You're not wrong. But so what I did was I started doing wrestling with my guys because one of the problems we had was, if we're going on an arrest and that kind of stuff, it's not necessarily appropriate to walk up to somebody and in front of their kids or whatever and just start, right? Sometimes, you sneak into somebody's house and they wake up with a buttstock to the face. But that's not necessarily appropriate. And so we started doing some wrestling stuff. We'd put mats out on the basketball court and and go to town. So so I recommend for everybody listening, right? Don't find one martial art and then just spend all your time doing that. Go find other things. Specifically, go find instructors that are trained in a variety of different things, right? That's I think one of the cool things about what you teach. And
and we kind of had a similar approach. You said, I don't like what's happening here, so I'm going to go do my own thing with my guys. We kind of did the same. It was like, I appreciate the time that I had with Krav Maga. I appreciate the instructors that I had. I learned a lot, but it's deficient. Because I've done these other things, and I know that in Muay Thai, there are things that we should be using from there. I know that from wrestling, we should be using some stuff. I know that from jiu-jitsu, we should be using some stuff. And there's no reason that we can't take Krav Maga mindset and principles and apply them in a way that works for or with the wrestling, the jiu-jitsu, the Muay Thai, the boxing, the guns, the knives, all of it.
I think this kind of summarizes almost the differences between military and civilian Krav Maga, between, the military back home and how we do Krav Maga here, is because I can tell you that we had, in my unit, we had a Krav Maga instructor pretty early on when I was still in training, who was some sort of on a world level Muay Thai fighter. Guess what we learned in Krav Maga during that period? We learned Muay Thai, right? That's what we did. We learned Muay Thai. Then we had another guy who came from a different background. Then we went to CT school, and I just got my nose broken all day long. Matter of fact, first day of CT school, we were learning knife defense. You have an hour and a half every day of CT school, and you wear your uniform pants and your stupid white shirt with your name written across it, right? And in their stupid little basketball thing. It was a little bit bigger than my dojo here, and of course, big guy gets called first, and here's the aluminum knife, and stab me as hard as you can. I'm like, okay, you're an idiot. So he punched me in the face, and he said, no. I said, stab me as hard as you can. I said, okay, now you've pissed me off. So I racked back, and I stabbed, of course, not knowing that much. I'm still in training.
Sure.
Stabbed him as hard as I could, and he did whatever to divert it, which, to this day, I have no idea what he did, because the next thing he did was literally, he took his two fingers, stuck them all the way up my nose, and started running that way and just planted my head in the ground. That's no move I've ever heard of, but after I got done crying and wiping my bloody nose, I was like, holy shit, that was good. That to me is Krav Maga, right?
Whatever it takes.
Yep, bite their ear off, knock their, eyeballs out. Yeah.
Good stuff, man.
Yeah, really fun.
Thank
really
you.
fun, brothers.
Enjoyed it.
Thanks for having the conversation. Thank you guys for watching us here on Tactical Rifleman. It's been really fun chatting with you and Amber, doing all these videos.
Been a good time.
Check out their YouTube channel. Check out their Instagram. It's Fit to Fight Republic. Facebook, Fit to Fight Republic. Like them. If you don't, you're doing something wrong. So check us out next week. Take it easy.
If you like this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter so you don't miss out on anything.